What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well. No episode of Convince the Panel this week. Decided to do something a little bit more laid back. My work schedule was a little bit messy, and trying to get everybody all lined up was just not happening. So my laziness took over to a degree, but not too much. I still wanted to do a live stream, and I'm very happy to be joined today by Mike of Did You See That, good friend, to talk about the first two films in the 28 series, the 28 days series, whatever people want to call it nowadays. Earlier this year, we got 28 weeks later, maybe like almost 2 months ago now, 28 years. And yeah, I was pretty excited for that movie because as a kid or like a teenager, I saw these movies for the first time, 28 days and weeks. And I remember enjoying them a lot. But frankly, I hadn't seen them in quite some time. So I was hoping to revisit them before the movie came out to do a video. And I never got around to it. But here we are now. And I decided to invite Mike on because he actually just covered them on his channel as well. But on top of that, it was a very first time watch for Mike. He had never seen the films before. So within a 3 week period, he saw all three films for the very first time. So Mike, firstly, how you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm doing good, brother. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about these movies in a bit more in depth as well.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's going to be a good time, and I appreciate you taking the time. So for anybody who's not familiar with the 28 Days series, we are going to be talking pretty openly on spoilers here, so just something to keep in mind. Yeah, so let's just get started with the first one. Came out in 2002. To nearly 2 hours long, and the base synopsis is 4 weeks after a mysterious, incurable virus spreads throughout the United Kingdom, a handful of survivors try to find sanctuary. It stars people like Cillian Murphy, Naomi Harris, Christopher Eccleston. I believe Brendan Gleeson in here as well. So some pretty big names. I would say in general that this franchise has been able to maintain like some fairly like big names throughout the entirety of the franchise. I was kind of surprised rewatching 28 weeks later at some of the big names that are in that movie. Like I remembered like the big stars. Hold on, my phone just fell out of my pocket. we're doing it live, folks. But I was kind of surprised rewatching that film at some of the big names in that film that I had completely forgot were in that movie. But yeah, this first one is directed by Danny Boyle, written by Alex Garland. Alex Garland being somebody who's gone on to become pretty prestigious director in the modern day, as well as a writer. And the two of them came together for the newest one 28 years later. So I will say also, we're all going to be specifically just talking about the days and weeks. If you guys want to hear our thoughts on years, I'm sure we'll kind of wrap that up here at the end. Maybe our thoughts on the series as it is right now and kind of what they have going moving forward with it. My dad coming in hot already with my boy and the myth, the legend, No Jaws Mike. Yeah. For anybody who does not know, Mike has not seen Jaws, which is crazy. Criminal work, to be honest. But it's okay. It's okay. I give him enough grief in our WhatsApp chats about movies all the time. Right. But yeah, man. So this movie, funny enough, my first memory of this film, because mind you, came out, what did I say, 2002? Yeah, I was way too young. I was maybe like 9 when this movie came out. And the first time that I actually saw this movie or anything of it was as a trailer at the beginning of a DVD. And I could be wrong. I want to say that DVD was Daredevil, the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie. I almost want to say at the beginning, the first trailer that played on that DVD every time was 28 Days Later. And I remember there just being this intrigue around it for me. And then eventually I did end up seeing it. And it's funny because I think this movie would go on to inspire a lot more zombie things in general. One of the most notable ones that instantly comes to mind with the way that this movie opens up with Cillian Murphy waking up in a hospital is The Walking Dead. Anybody who's seen The Walking Dead, it's literally how the show starts, essentially. So I feel like this was definitely an influential film for the time. It's also famous for being filmed at the time on kind of handheld camcorders to kind of give it this rough VHS look to it. So with all that said, before I get into my
I don't know if something's happened with Anthony's internet and by myself, I'm not too sure, but I think he was talking about my thoughts. So yeah, I don't know.
Dude, I literally I'm using my computer and I accidentally accidentally swiped backwards and like went back into like I backed out of the stream altogether.
It's
Nice.
all
All right.
good.
It says my connection is unstable. Do you hear me and see me okay?
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right, to everybody watching, we're live. We're having I had a little technical difficulties there, but I'll try to swipe the mic, swipe the mouse anymore. Yeah, what I was gonna say was that since I've seen these films before, this was a first time watch for you. I'm curious, watching it today in 2025. What were your thoughts on these on this first one, 28 days later?
Yeah, I think it's like really cool to have like the two comparisons between me and yourself, because as you said, you've seen these many of times. Where when this came out, I was 12 years old, and of course, it was shot in my home country, right, the UK. Like the behind the scenes and stuff. Like, so I think now that we're in the space of doing YouTube, I had a bit more of an appreciation for this movie, seeing it as the first time as well, because of like the behind the scenes. And like on London streets, they were shooting this movie at like 4 in the morning. They had like 1 hour to prep that like bus scene that's just crashed on the floor, to then clean that up for people coming into London to go to work on that morning. Which nowadays to do that would be insane. You'd have to close the full streets, everything, right? Back then, that time. So yeah, man, I think first impressions was like, I thought it was a cool movie. I thought you're right, like it definitely inspired a lot of generations and zombie movies we've had since. Emma, for people who don't know, my wife was telling me that this movie inspired the running zombie. I believe before this we didn't have running zombies, from
Right. Yeah.
she told me. So you're right, like it kind of inspired, I guess, a lot of filmmakers, even in the modern day, to do like a handheld or found footage zombie movies. And like looking back on it, it is groundbreaking for what it is. I think, like as a first time experience, there was elements I enjoyed. Then there was character arcs I really liked, especially Brendan Gleeson. I'm sure we'll dive into later on. But yeah, some of the filmmaking was definitely sloppy. Some of it was definitely like a lot of shaky cam, so you can't really see the full action sequences or big dramatic moments really hit home because of just in and out the focus just all the time. But I think it was an overall story. It was interesting, and I wanted to see these two movies because of the 28 years later we just had. Of course, it's meant to be a follow-on from these two, which not as such. I think as we get on, it will. But yeah, so overall, I liked it. I think I gave like a 3 out of 5 stars. So for me, it's like a rewatchability kind of movie.
Yeah, fair. On rewatch, it's interesting. I always had the perspective that I liked 28 days later more than weeks. And on rewatch, I found myself enjoying weeks a little bit more. And I think weeks is just a little bit more entertaining. But I'd argue that as like a smaller zombie flick, that maybe the first one is just a little bit better. Overall, like in terms of like the craft, there are elements of the second one that are just like what is going on,
Right.
but it does have like kind of like a momentum that keeps things a little more exciting for you as a viewer. But we'll get into that when we talk about weeks. But yeah, it's interesting now moving forward with the franchise, because 28 years later, yeah, like tonally, character wise, it's you could watch 28 weeks or 28 years without seeing days. You can watch any of these movies without seeing the other ones and still follow what's going on. On one hand, I like that, right? Like it kind of allows for new viewers to pop in, no problem. On another hand, it begs the question of like, for anybody who maybe binged the first two, like yourself, expecting to see some sort of continuity, it's like we're not really getting that. But Danny Boyle has already said in interviews the next movie that's coming out in like the beginning part of 2026 will feature Cillian Murphy in like a small role. And then the third movie in their new trilogy is going to be Cillian Murphy's movie again. So that's kind of exciting, especially with who Cillian Murphy has become as an actor since 2002. He's become a really big name in the world of film and television. So to think of him in a new 28, like I'm assuming they're going to call it 28 years with some sort of subtitle. I believe that's what they're doing with the one that's coming out at the beginning of this next year. So I'm excited to see what they do. Yeah, so filmmaking wise for me, I think it's a really interesting film, but man, watching it today on like, I think if you watch this back in the day, like when I remember watching it on like older like TVs, there was a charm to it for sure. And I think watching it today on like, these really high definition flat screen TVs, it does look pretty ugly. On one hand, it gives it a charm, especially in those scenes. Like I saw my dad pop in here. He said that you said it just as he was writing it, but he popped in and said, when Killian's walking around empty London, they had to close roads for a few hours before work. But in those sequences, when he's roaming around those areas, or when he first meets like Naomi Harris's character, there's kind of a charm to that gritty filmmaking of the camera work and stuff. But as you get later into the movie, man, there's just moments where you're like, I just wish this movie just looked a little bit better. Because at a certain point, especially like the opening with the chimp who ends up, sending the rage, it almost feels like a mockbuster. It almost feels like it's obviously something that's like a Planet of the Apes mockbuster, And not to say that it's bad, but just that it just doesn't it doesn't hold up as much today. I think there was a charm to it at the time. And I just remember it being almost more eventful too. So upon a rewatch, it's a pretty uneventful film. Cillian Murphy is roaming around. I love the sequence where he goes into the church, and he, is like, that was like one of those scenes I remember seeing for the first time that would kind of creep me out because I was a kid and I thought, wow, this is like really cool. But yeah, that sequence is really great when you kind of get the introduction. I like the notion of the rage virus as well. This virus that like turns people really, really fast. There's no ability to survive that if you're in the midst of like a bunch of them. Like if people just start getting bit, it's over, dude. Like, and so I think it creates like tension, which is something I think an advantage that 28 Weeks Later has as you get later like into that film, because there's like just a lot of high stakes like moments where like a lot of crazy zombie stuff is happening. But yeah, I found the film to be a little uneventful. It's kind of like aimless at times. Cillian Murphy's roaming around. He meets Naomi Harris. They randomly stumble upon Brendan Gleeson's character and his daughter. Then they decide to go on a little road trip together. There's some moments that are just like random, like where they're like decide to drive the car through that like tunnel and just start driving it on top of other cars and stuff. And of course, it destroys the car, like it messes up the car. And then they get to where they're supposed to go. There seems to be nobody there. Then Brendan Gleeson becomes a rage zombie from just looking up and some blood dropping in his eye. Then you got Christopher Eccleston showing up that you think is part of this good guy group, but instead he's just kind of there to, take advantage of Naomi Harris and the young girl in the movie. And then Cillian Murphy goes all Batman mode, and that's about it, man. I'm curious, what were your thoughts on the story of the movie?
Man, I think it's an interesting one, right? Because when you like, as we've been talking, right, like the opening scene set up for like The Walking Dead later down the line,
right?
This kind of also set up for future zombie movies and shows. What I mean by that is like Christopher Eccleston character, who's this head of this army group recruit kind of, hope over a radio signal. Like you think he's a great guy, and at first I didn't see the twist coming. And I was like, oh, like this really great guy, they're going to find solace at this place. But actually, this is an inspiration for a lot of zombie movies, especially The Walking Dead, where you've got like a bad group, right? They're all just for themselves. They don't care about other survivors, or they want like a piece of land or whatever the case should be. In this case, they want women, right? For whatever the pleasures or desire. So it kind of also gives audiences that perspective, in some essence, I guess, ahead of its time, because it gives audience that essence of being like, right, if there was a zombie apocalypse like today, right, is everyone going to get along with each other? Is there going to be some men who are going to try utilize maybe some advantages they have where they had like a base, food, they had everything, but in return they want something that, is against someone's will? I'll say that as such. So I guess in some essence, like the filmmaking side is some kind of like advanced in terms of like what we have today. Some of it you could say like, oh, well, that's 28 days later, hearken to. But yeah, I think like you're right. Like it's there's kind of like meeting Brendan Gleeson's character in terms of to forward the story, right? To give these Naomi Harris and Cillian like a base to stay at for a little while. And then you're right, he goes like full Batman mode to the rescue. So some of it, I was like, okay, it's a bit silly and a bit goofy, but at the same time, again, I think like nowadays for the movies we've seen in the modern time, I'm like, yeah, actually, this was before then. Like, this was like a foundation for a lot of movies, and I guess like people who study at colleges and university probably look at this movie and think like, wow, this is like a groundbreaking for its time, and especially that VHS DVD era, as you said, like some of the movie looks ugly. I agree. Some of it I was like, wow, that's awful. But back then it was probably like the charm and like that was amazing for audiences, So I think overall, to answer the question, I know I went a bit off tangent. Yeah, I definitely think there's some elements I really enjoyed. Brendan Gleeson was my favorite character actually in the whole thing.
Right.
I loved his. He's a great actor, but I loved his appearance. I felt like he really gave the movie some heart and charm, and someone to really root for. Because at that point, like Jim Cillian Murphy was just doing some stupid ass decisions, and I was like, I can't get behind this guy.
Right.
But Naomi Harris was pretty good. She was kind of like a badass woman character as well.
Yeah, I like the characters. It's one of those things where I like the characters. I like the cast for sure. You got a really strong cast. There was rumors of Naomi Harris appearing in 28 years later. So I kept expecting to see that happen in the movie, but it never does. I'm assuming with the announcement that Killian will be in the next one, Naomi Harris has to be in that one, right? Like, or at least you would hope so. Unless they they do the classic like she died off camera kind of thing.
I hope not.
But yeah, I hope not too, especially given the fact that both Naomi Harris and Cillian Murphy have become big actors. I think in terms of like Brendan Gleeson's character, I agree, was like such a likable, fun character. And I almost wish that he had been given a moment to like defend his daughter, and then become a rage virus zombie instead of like him just being like, shoo away, bird, and then get some, like blood in his eyes, and then he's it's like he's a zombie now. It's like, all right, dude. Like, I guess what it shows is like the danger around every corner. Something that even seems like safe is dangerous. But I feel like that's one of those moments that kind of just goes into like I think my biggest gripes with this movie, which is that like sometimes shit just happens, like that's one of those moments, or like the choices like characters would make, like them deciding to drive the car over a bunch of other cars in that tunnel while they're being chased by zombies, and then they're like surprised that the car stopped working. It's like, all right. Like, but yeah, I do agree with what you're saying though. Like I do think when you look at this film, it's undeniable that its legacy has inspired other zombie related things. And I think that's part of why 28 Days Later has kind of remained like a popular franchise, a popular film within horror history, even if I don't think it's necessarily as good as some people praise it to be. I'm curious on your thoughts. Some people say it's one of the best zombie movies ever, one of the best pieces of zombie media ever. I do think it's one of the most notable ones. I do think it's an inspirational one. What are your thoughts on it being one of the best?
Nah. But again, I think it's tough to critique because there'll be people who think that this was their big revolutionary horror movie in the 2002. There were people who were older than us, more likely seen this and was like, wow, this is groundbreaking. This is like genre defying. And this kind of made the zombie horror genre of the modern times. Whereas like us, like nowadays, we've watched this maybe multiple times or for the first time and like older age, and we're like, yeah, we can have a newfound appreciation for this. But actually, there's a lot of horror movies that's come along the way, and especially with zombie movies, there's so many now that's become so advanced, and TV shows like The Walking Dead, The Last of Us. It's a little bit different, The Last of Us, but kind of like that kind of vibe. So no, I don't think it's one of the best, but I appreciate for what it did for the zombie genre.
For sure. No, yeah, it's nice to hear the thoughts of somebody who's just now seen it all, and which in a second, in a little bit, we'll get into our thoughts on 28 Weeks Later, because I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on that, not knowing anything really about this series going in. Did you know anything about the series going in other than it was zombie related?
No, not as such. I've seen the DVD posted many times for both of the movies.
Right, of course. Classic poster. I'll give it that. Like, great looking posters.
Right. Right, like just the bright red and like kind of like the, I don't know if it's like a chemical kind of symbol in the
Yeah, the
background.
the biohazard symbol, and then
Yeah,
the like the red eyes, like classic. I remember going in Blockbuster all the time and just seeing it there
right.
before I had seen it, and just thinking, oh man, that movie looks so cool. That was one of my favorite things about going to Blockbuster back in the day, or going to any video rental store, was just like seeing the covers,
Yeah.
because even sometimes the worst movies in the world, you'd see the poster of, and you were just like, oh man, I want to watch that, and it'd be called like, I don't know, Bojangles toe fungus or something, but it'd have some cool image, and you're like, dude, I need to see that movie. Um,
So
but yeah,
true.
28 Days Later was definitely one of those.
No, no, I agree. I agree. It's so true. And yeah, to answer your question, yeah, I didn't really know too much about them. I didn't really know about any like big famous scenes, or I knew Cillian Murphy was in the first one. That's all I kind of knew. But I know Emma, because she's such a huge horror fan. Like, she loves them. So she's like, "Oh, I love them. Like, 28 Days is one of my favorite movies of all time." And I'm like, "Wow, okay." So that's kind of my knowledge, really.
Did she feel the same way when you guys rewatched it? Does she still like love it just the same?
Yeah, yeah, she still really loved the movie. She still had that nostalgia for when she first saw it as like a teenager, and then like now. And she also loves like, we haven't touched on this, but like the main song that they use.
Right. The musical score, I will say that
Yeah,
yeah, the musical score that trickles, because I believe they use it in 28 Weeks Later as well too. I
yeah, they
I'm,
do.
I can't remember if they used it in the third one. Did they, I want to say they do, but I don't remember, to be honest.
I don't. Maybe I think towards the
The end,
end.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I do like that song though. I won't lie. Like it adds to the atmosphere. It adds to the overall feeling for sure. So that was definitely something I enjoyed upon rewatch. By the way, we have the Basco scenario in here. What's up, my friend? Thanks
Hey,
for
what's going
stopping
on?
by. But yeah, dude. Overall, upon rewatch for me with 28 Days Later, it was a fun time. It was a fun time to rewatch. It's nice to see a film that tried something different. In the age of like translating from like mostly films being filmed on film to then digital, to then make the ballsy move in 2002 to like film on like VHS like camcorders to give it this grainy look. That was a decision. Like I'm sure it was off putting to a lot of people, but I think that creative choice ultimately pulls a lot of people in, and ultimately got a lot of people to be like, who's this director, Danny Boyle? Now, Danny Boyle had already done things, of course. He was
Right.
popular for, I think he had already done like Train Spotting and stuff like that,
Hmm.
starring Ewan McGregor, which is a great film for anybody. Have you ever seen Train Spotting?
Yeah, I've seen them both.
Okay, yeah, great
Believe
movies,
it or
man.
not, I've seen them both.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I love that first one for sure, and yeah, I ended up seeing. I remember as a kid when I saw Train Spotting for the first time, just to go off the tracks just a little bit here, but when I saw Train Spotting for the first time, and I saw it mainly because I knew that it was kind of what like helped really popularize Ewan McGregor. Like he had been in other things, but that was kind of like
Right.
what helped kind of launch him. And then just a few years later, he'd be in Star Wars as
Mhm.
Obi-Wan. So when I
Yeah.
saw him in Train Spotting, I'm like, Obi-Wan's just getting drugged out of his mind here. It's just like it's just the I always think it's so funny when you see you have a specific view of an actor, and then you see them in something from their earlier days or just something else in general that they're popular for, and how wildly different those performances can be sometimes,
Right.
and sometimes it could be
Right.
for in a really cool way too, right? Like I remember seeing, you know, in on the notion of Star Wars, I remember, seeing Liam Neeson in as Qui-Gon Jinn for the first time in The
Yeah.
Phantom Menace. And then
Yeah.
when I got older and seeing him in Schindler's List, it was like such a different like
Mhm.
performance, like he still brought, like, he employed the same things that he's good at, but it was nice to see him in such a different, like, serious role that removes the mysticism and the like fantasy elements of it, but yeah, Danny Boyle,
Agreed.
great director, and I've always really appreciated like his approach to like unique storytelling, and when you look at what he did with the new movie, they opted to film most of it on iPhones, and
Yeah.
what's it called? I really appreciated that there was like some really cool rigs that they showed pictures of like a
Yeah.
bunch of like iPhones like around the actors, so they can do this really like quick cut like editing, which
Mhm.
I definitely added to the overall feel and vibe. And one other thing we haven't really mentioned, or it's also the practical effects for 28 Days Later in terms of like the makeup and the blood effects and stuff like that. Um, sorry, by the way, I don't know if you're hearing those
Okay.
texts come in, but yeah, dude. So in general, I really like the practical effects. How did you feel about the practical effects of the movie?
Yeah, I felt they were pretty effective. It felt as if this movie was kind of a labor of love and a passion project.
Right.
Like, not, apart from being revolutionary in filmmaking in terms of, as you said, going for VHS kind of style, gritty kind of vibe to the movie. Yeah, I felt like the practical effects were also really good. It also kind of showcased, okay, this is what you can do in a zombie movie with practical effects.
Right.
Again, I felt like they were really good, but again, I feel like it was a bit of a hit and miss because of the whole shaky cam. You didn't get to see the full effect of the practical effects sometimes, which I think
Right.
was a little bit of a detriment to the movie overall.
Especially in the first one, right? Because in the second one, there's there's a little bit more time spent like seeing the zombies, in
Yeah.
particular one in particular, Robert
Yes.
Carlyle's character. Um,
Hmm.
which I'm gonna be. I have a couple questions about that when we get into that one,
Sure.
um, but yeah, I do agree. There are moments where you wish you could see things a little bit better because the shaky cam part of it adds to that camcorder vibe, and it was just a couple of years after Blair Witch Project, which of course kind of popularized the use of like a camcorder kind of thing in movies, and obviously ended up
Right.
popularizing found footage. Now this movie's not found footage, but you can tell they kind of took some inspiration
Yeah.
from the shaky cam elements using the camcorders for this movie.
Mm.
But yeah, now as far as like moving forward, I'm really curious to see what they would do with Cillian Murphy 28 years later. Is he going to be like a loony? Is he going to kind of still be the same character here? Uh, you know, I'm really curious on that front. What would you like to see them do with Cillian Murphy in the future installments?
Yeah, I would love to see them really answer the question primarily, okay, what's he been up to in this entire time? Because
Right.
the last time we see him in the end of 28 Days Later, he's at this cottage with Naomi Harris' character and the girl. I forgot the girl's name. Um, she was terrible in this movie, by the way. The actress. But maybe now that she's an adult, maybe she's better. But to answer your question, yeah, I would love to know, like, okay, what's he been up to? Because they put out that big SOS at the end of the first movie. So I'm curious whether like the cop, like the chopper, did actually pick them up. Did they take them to a safe place? Is he still in this remote kind of cottage in the countryside? We don't know at this point. So I would really like for them to expand on, okay, what's he been up to? Is he still with Naomi Harris's character? And apologies, I forgot the character's name. Like what have they been up to? And I just want them to see a big impact because touching on to finalize this question answer, sorry, to touch on the end of 28 years later, so spoilers if no one's seen the new one, we get that whole thing with Spike coming across the Jimmy gang, right?
Go Power Rangers.
literally that. But it's interesting because in the UK, obviously, we know more about the person's kind of based upon, right, than the States.
Right. I know who you're talking about, that guy who like ended up being a creep, right? Like the
Yeah.
Jimmy
Yeah.
something, right?
Yeah.
Jimmy,
I'll be cautious on the name because I don't want to get YouTube to be like, no naughty words here.
oh, whatever, dude.
Right.
Well, listen, we ain't no soft channel out here.
No.
Yeah, but yeah, I know you talk about that. I can't remember his last name. Is it
Savile.
right? There you go. Right.
There you go.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
it's so funny. Real quick on that guy, right? Like the notion that people were like surprised that he ended up being like a because he's dead now, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and they discovered like after he's dead that he was actually like a creep. It's like I don't know about you, bro. I've seen only a few pictures of the guy, but
Yeah.
like I don't
Yeah.
know. Like I don't like to just judge a book by its cover, but I don't think that guy
Yeah.
should have been around kids. Let's just say that. But
Nah,
it's
I
kind of
agree.
funny that they chose to kind of have like this because that guy wouldn't exist in the 28 days later universe, right? Because the world's
Right.
been decimated for 28 years already. I don't know when he was doing what he was doing. But
So,
um,
so this is the interesting thing, man, and not to interrupt you there.
no,
This
you're
is the
good. Listen,
interest.
bro, I had you on so we can just sit here and ramble. So feel free to cut me off whenever you want.
Nah, no, man, it's all good. No, so I think the interesting thing is, and Emma brought this point up actually on our drive home when we watched 28 Years Later. I know we divert off 28 Days, but we'll get back to
No, it's
that.
all right. It's all right.
But I think it's interesting because Emma's right. Like, so when it started in 2002, right, the world went kaput in terms of the rage virus. So at that point, this huge personality, Jimmy, right, he was a humongous personality here in the UK. And I think this is why it took years and years after he died to come out about him. Because he was kind of like a huge figure in the UK, like in the royal family, best friends with them. So this guy was massive, right? Hospitals, he helped out, named streets after the guy, right? So he was humongous
Right.
influence on so many people. And I think this is the interesting thing with Danny Boyle's decision that I think comes into the answer of Cillian Murphy, because with people seeing that ending and they're like, what the hell was that? You know, myself included, I was like, this does not fit the tone of 28 Years Later. I think the fact of having him in that universe not outed as a bad guy, but then the audience of today knows who this bad guy actually is, they kind of gives them an ammunition to hate the Jimmy character in the second movie and
Right. Right.
his cult or his gang, because I feel like they're gonna try be a really nice person to Spike, a bit like a Christopher Eggleston situation in the first movie.
Right.
They're gonna be like a nice guy. They're gonna be like, "Oh, hey, we'll help you out, kid. We'll get you on your feet, and we'll give you everything that you want and survive." And the big thing where Aaron Taylor Johnson's character tries to find him, and maybe he gets killed by this gang. I don't know. But to go back into the answer, I think it gives that situation already there where we've got a next bad guy. Cillian Murphy could see this and be like, look, I've been through something similar with the first story of the Christopher Eggleston situation. He sees that for Spike, and maybe he becomes a Batman 2.0 and has to save him towards the end. So that's my kind of feeling.
It's curious too I'm curious too to see how they handle it because Cillian Murphy's character's name is Jim too.
Yes.
So it's gonna be Jim and Jimmy.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting. The battle of the Jims. But yeah,
Right.
that is definitely an interesting choice. And I'm curious. I'm really, listen, dude. I didn't dislike 28 Years Later. I liked a lot about it. I think it was a solid flick. With the ending that was like a little bit all over the place. Not just that final moment with the Power Rangers ending, but like even before that, with everything with like Spike and his mom, and I don't want to spoil that for anybody who hasn't seen it since it's newer, but there's some choices made, everything because there's a really interesting like father-son dynamic there with Aaron Taylor Johnson and Spike. There's a really interesting thing there with Jodie Comer's character, and the movie has things to say about like life and death in a world filled with death and letting go and celebrating life. There's some interesting things, but it's all mixed into this Power Rangers ending and a ginormous penis, and it's just like, dude, what is going on in this movie at times? So there was definitely some elements. I'm curious to see how they wrap it up in the next one, especially bringing especially bringing in Cillian Murphy's character. Now, that brings us now to the next movie that I don't think is ever going to really tie into the franchise anymore, other than just being in that world. And that's 28 Weeks Later. That would come out in 2007. And real quick read of the synopsis says 6 months after the rage virus was inflicted on the population of Great Britain, the U.S. Army helps to secure a small area of London for survivors to repopulate and start again. But not everything goes according to plan. This time around, the film was, hold on, of course, got ads popping up here. This time around, it was directed by Juan Carlos Fresnadillo. Yeah. And stars people like Jeremy Renner. You got Rose Byrne in here, Robert Carlyle. You got Idris Elba in the mix. And quite a few like faces that actually surprised me seeing him here in the film. And primarily, I like the opening of this film. I think the opening is really strong, sets things up really well. You have Robert Carlyle and his wife and a group of other survivors that are in this house, and everything goes awry. And Robert Carlyle decides to just abandon his wife. Crazy. I was watching this with Haley, and we were both just like, I couldn't imagine like staring face to face with her, knowing that there's like zombies in the room, and just being like, "Peace." and then and then turning back and seeing her like banging on a window, like calling for my help, and then just being like, I'm out of here. Like while I see her get you ripped down by a zombie. Crazy, crazy work. Yeah, first time watch for you as well, dude. What were your thoughts on this movie, especially after having just seen 28 Days? And this one abandons the camcorder element and is filmed more like a traditional film in the modern day at that time. So what were your thoughts going from days to weeks?
Yeah, man. Firstly, I just want to touch on that opening. That opening was epic. I loved it. Emma told me before, and she's like, before we start this movie, just so you know, it's got one of the best zombie openings you'll see. I was like, oh, okay, what am I in for? And funny enough, after we watched that part, a bit like you and Haley, right? We were having that conversation. She's like, would you leave me like in that situation? and I said to her, I was like, nah. I was like, actually, what I'll do is I'll give you the cats. You get out with the cats. I'll take one for the team. As long as the boys are safe, that's the main thing. But no, man. I think this movie does a lot of good things to kind of further the story, but also give us something a little bit different. Because again, that opening scene, a bit like the 28 Days Later, where he's secluded in this hospital, he's woke up, he's like, what the hell's going on in the world, right? And he's drinking like Pepsis and Tangos and all these sponsored drinks and all that kind of stuff. But like this one, again, it kind of questions like humanity, right? Like if you were in that position, what are you going to do? If you can't both get out, do you sacrifice yourself? Do you sacrifice your loved one? Would you try to get your loved one out and you both die? Like it just is a lot, and also sets up his character, because I love the scene afterwards where he gets reunited with his kids and he has to tell them, right, this is what happened to your mom, right?
Right.
I know he lies about it as such, but he has to, and straight away as an audience, like, oh, what an awkward conversation that's gonna be, you know. So yeah, I think it's got some positives. Rob Carlyle's a great actor, so I was like, really great to see him in here. I like this character. I'm kind of good to kill them off. I'll be quite frank with you. But yeah, like I think it does some good things. Like it was nice to see Jeremy Renner. I really didn't expect to see him in this movie. One quick thing I do want to say, I think a lot of people have missed this, but it's very, very, very brief. Is you're right? I think they have decided to retcon this movie in the whole new universe. But in the 28 years later, when they do those kind of artistic flashing shots of like the wars and the backstory and the lore kind of thing, there is a quick, very quick snippet of this movie, the part where Jeremy Renner's like doing a snipering on the building, and he's told like, right, you kill everyone. There's a very quick snippet of that in there as like a homage, I'm guessing.
Right.
But yeah, man, I think there's some good elements of this movie. I didn't like the kids though. I'll be honest with you, I didn't think they were great. But the interesting thing is the young girl, the daughter of the Robert Carlyle's character, Imogen Poots, she's gone on to do a lot of like better acting roles, and she has actually become like a really good actor. So again, it's one of those where I'm kind of like, I would maybe like to see those two kids, like what have they been up to in this entire time? Did they survive? Did they get out of England? Like, the repercussions. So yeah, again, a film I think has a few good moments, but not as impactful in the long-term scale like 28 Days Later was. And I think this is why this movie, by a lot of people, is seen as not as good.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's one of those where it's like this one doesn't have like that element where it's inspiring as much, like it's not like doing something that's overly different. But I would say it's more fun to watch than the first one. But yeah, when I said earlier that they kind of like haven't done anything with this film, or I don't know if they will, I didn't mean like they were retconning it, but more so that like I'd be curious to see if they bring the characters from this movie into the fold at some point, or if they like reference the events here any further than just, like showing kind of like what you said, like a snippet of that time,
Yeah.
Or if this will just kind of be like it's a one-off within the franchise with its own characters and its own story. One thing I'll say right out of the gate is the notion of trying to reopen London so early, 28 weeks after like this crazy virus has just spread and like everybody's essentially dead, and you haven't even cleared the entirety of the mainland yet. That's kind of crazy, dude. Like, so when Haley and I were watching and they were like bringing people in, like I would not want to be part of the first run of people, like especially since like, and Haley made a good point. Like, if it happened here, like in the States, I wouldn't want to come back. If I was somewhere else, like if I got relocated somewhere, I'm just gonna stay there and start a new life, And look at 28 years later, right? Like they kind of make it known that like it's not really something that's spread too much further than the UK, like it's still all low. At this point, why haven't they just nuked the UK altogether? Like I know that's probably like the worst outlook, but like if the UK is the main area that this is all happening and it's not happening anywhere else, bro, just send that thing up in flames, bro, because and which they kind of do at the end of this movie to a degree, but it's crazy to me that they opted to try to bring people back so shortly after and try to like, now mind you, everything would have been fine probably if it wasn't for these damn kids. These kids are the ones that really ruin everything when they decide to go off into the mainland where they're not supposed to. They end up encountering their mother, who we learn is immune to the virus, or at least not fully immune, but she's a carrier.
Yeah.
But she's not, she won't turn into an actual zombie. I thought that was a really interesting element, especially upon rewatching. I hadn't seen this movie in a while. So like I was surprised to be reminded of some of the big faces in the mix. I was surprised to see how good that intro was. I was surprised to see, how exciting some of the sequences were and how much happens in the film. At times it feels like too much happens. And what I mean by that is it just feels like characters come and go like crazy, right? Like there's this whole element to there's this whole element to like the mother, your mom died, and then it's like, oh, we find your mom, and then like seconds into the mom being found, Robert Carlyle comes there, and then she like, they kiss, and he immediately turns into a zombie, and it just starts this all out insanity that leads to just like everybody starting to turn into a zombie. The mom gets torched first she gets absolutely decimated by Robert Carlyle. Like he just destroys her. And I'm assuming, I guess, kind of this was like he was kind of like the first alpha that they kind of like established in a way. I wouldn't, definitely not the alpha we saw in 28 years. He wasn't packing heat like that guy. But like the first one that seemed to be a little bit more intelligent, if you will, or like seemed a little bit more in tune with what was going on. He was hiding in places, when they're like blowing up the city and there's fire everywhere. There's that great shot of him inside where he's just like the fire is passing by, even though, let's be real, that fire would have destroyed him too, but for some reason he was immune to it. And after that, man, it's just like things happen. Jeremy Renner, who's kind of a side character for the first 40 minutes, becomes kind of like a central piece, and then he ends up getting torched. There was just like so many moments that it's just like so much is going on. But I thought it was a fun watch. I don't think it's, like you said, like not as influential as the first one, but a fun watch nonetheless. Good performances. I would like to see these kids somewhere else, but they are the problem everywhere in the movie. Everything that goes wrong. Rose Byrne, it's nice to see her here as like a big role. Because she's one of those actors who's been in like so many big projects. Like everybody knows who she is if you're into movies, but she's not somebody that like often leads a lot of movies, like she tends to be like a really strong supporting character. And so I thought she was a solid part of this movie for sure. And I thought it was well shot. It was exciting to watch, but it was one of those that was just frustrating for characters overall. One thing I noticed rewatching it though was the CGI on like the planes and the helicopters in the movie. Not good. So
nah.
Yeah, what were your thoughts on the story in this one versus the story in 28 Days?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think a lot of the elements of the story was a bit messy. Like the first one, I think, feels a little bit more contained because you're just following Jim's story, but then you've got the story of these two kids. Then Jeremy Renner's character almost feels like a Brendan Gleeson's character for like the sake of being like, all right, he's this good guy. He's this guy with a moral conscience who actually wants to help instead of just killing off these people under the military army commands. Yeah, I felt like Rose Byrne, like I was shocked to see her still alive. I generally didn't think that. I was like, oh well, she's gone, right? But then like, yeah, she gets like mutilated immediately. And I would have liked to have seen her more like for the story to your question, I would have liked to see more of like a family dynamic here.
Right. Yeah. Agreed. I feel like they abandoned that way too quick.
Yeah, I do. Because like you're right, she's like a half and half, right? So I would have liked to maybe focus on her a little bit to be like, okay, there's moments where she maybe feels like she wants to eat her kids, part of the zombie side. But then like the human side is kind of like, well, actually, I can't do that. I'm a mum to these kids, like to maintain her kind of humanity.
I did it
Um,
again. I did it again. I'm sorry.
it's all good, bro. It's all good. I just carried on. So yeah, like I agree. I feel like the humanity side and this element because in the first movie we only focus on one character, Jim, and we see that quick scene when he goes to his house and sees the picture of his parents, and that's literally his backstory.
Right.
Here, he had a backstory of like, the dilemma of the dad leaving the mum, then the mum's actually still alive, then these kids finding out the truth. I feel like there could have been a really good story just focusing on family, but then they have to throw in like Idris Elba, they have to throw in like Jeremy Renner, and just so much stuff that I feel like it's entertaining, but I feel like it just loses itself.
Right. It's entertaining because it goes crazy, right? It's entertaining because it just gets all over the place and there's like crazy zombie stuff. And then there's moments where like they're like, shoot all the zombies, as the outbreak starts to happen. And then it's like, shoot everybody. So like as a movie, it's like just enticing to watch because it's crazy. But as a piece of like storytelling with a long lasting, like with a story that's going to last beyond people wanting to just watch this one movie. Yeah, it was undeniably just kind of like, all right. It feels like it goes in four different directions at a certain point. At times it feels like a genuine like three different movies. It feels like that family drama like you were just mentioning. It feels like a let's kind of repopulate London kind of situation. And then at the same time it also feels like kind of set up for the notion of like it's never going to get better, like we're just going to obviously setting up for what like it's kind of crazy because had the kids not done what they did, would 28 years later exist? Like, I guess they could have written that something happened anyway, but like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, there's just moments of it that just seem like so silly in the premise. Like, why would you try to repopulate the earth or repopulate London so quickly after? Knowing that you haven't actually searched all of London to see if there's any rage virus still out there, of any kind.
It's a good question because they changed the location setting for 28 years later.
Right.
Where obviously I know you've been to Durham, right, this year,
Right.
like my area of the woods. Where they shot that new movie is about maybe an hour drive from where I live. So they moved completely away from London in the first two movies, focuses on to like a very small area. So yeah, I don't know. It's definitely questionable for sure.
Yeah, for sure, man. And by the time they got to the end of the second one, it was weird because it was one of those movies where I can go like, that was fun to watch, but I don't necessarily know that it's something that really, it doesn't have that long-lasting impression. At least I think I thought it did because of the name, because of its tie to the 28 franchise.
Yeah.
But by the time I got done watching all three, and this might be a hot take for some, I ended up giving all three movies 3 out of 5 stars. And I kind of felt like the series was, in retrospect, a little overrated. Not a bad series, a fun time, a good zombie series, a first film that's really kind of inspirational for more zombie stuff moving forward. But a franchise in general, narratively and character-wise, that outside of its cool musical score and like again its inspirational elements in the first one, that I felt was a little overrated. How did you feel after you watched all three within like a 2-week period? Like did you feel like it lived up to the hype? Did you feel like it was a little overrated? Where'd you sit with it?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's a little bit overrated for what it is. I feel as if it was kind of on like a testing of like a Mount Rushmore of zombie movies, and I was like, I've seen better zombie movies.
Right.
But again, because I've seen this in 2025 for the first time when this came out in 2022, like 23 years later, basically, I've seen the movie. I guess it's an audience perception of when they grew up with this, when they're viewing this in life, their exposure to zombie movies. Like if they've only seen one or two before, but they've been terrible, they'll be like, "Wow, this was blockbuster," right?
Right, right.
But yeah, I think a little bit overrated, but I can understand like the love and fan base it has for what it's produced at the time, and especially the first movie for when that came out as well.
Right, for sure. The first film, I think, will always kind of have like a special place in the world. I think that the first film is the reason that there was hype for the third film, right? Like, I don't think it was the second film that really did it. And I think the second film was really just riding the coattails of that first one. Which is why I think they're going to bring Cillian Murphy back. They're likely not going to bring back the kids from the second one. Like they're likely going to just let that be a movie in the franchise. What are your thoughts on having a trilogy now? I mean, obviously there's a new trilogy that's being built with the new ones, but what are your thoughts on having a trilogy at the moment that has really no narrative continuity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. I think it feels a little bit all over the shop at the moment because the first two at least tried connecting to one another, mainly through text scroll, really.
Really?
But it still acknowledges, right, this is what happened before we got to this stage in the chapter. So I feel like the first movie was a little bit more subdued, a little bit more, I guess, kind of just tame in a story. Then the second one is, as we've been speaking, more entertaining. It's more kind of bombastic. Like there's just so much thrown at the screen. And the brand new movie, 28 years later, again feels a bit like the first one, a bit more contained, a bit more, just focusing primarily on a family of three, like the mom, dad, and son, while having like a wacky ending. So the trilogy at the minute feels all over the place. It's not a trilogy I'd be like, right, let me sit down one night, get the popcorn ice cream and let me just shove on the full trilogy and enjoy it. I'd be like, these movies are all over the place, really.
Yeah, and I would say tonally as well. They're not like there's no consistency on a tonal level. Like
Nah.
and even with the two Danny Boyle films now, the first one and the third one, like there isn't really a tonal consistency there. The two films feel wildly different. And the first film is like this, like you said, like a subdued, like zombie drama
Mm-hmm.
that isn't even really about the zombies as much as it is about like the people. And then the second movie is like a zombie action movie, really, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And then the third film is kind of like a almost like you said, subdued again, like the first one to a degree, but because the scale of like the fact that this has been happening for 28 years, like the world is in more disarray. People have just kind of given up on trying to like that area is just like a no-go zone. Like at this point, like it's not like they're trying to repopulate or trying to save again, they should just nuke it. Like that's just what makes sense to me. Like if other militaries on other parts of the world are not dealing with this, like the fact that they haven't just completely nuked that part of the world to avoid, I get it. For them, they're like, let's just contain it. They're kind of treating it like Jurassic Park, or just leave the dinosaurs on the island, But it's kind of crazy because there's people there that they've just abandoned, At that point, bro, just put them out of their misery, Like maybe I'm wrong in thinking that, but just
Yeah,
like
it's so funny. Imagine the next 20 years later, they're like, right, your mission is to get free DNA samples from different zombies.
honestly, that would be pretty cool. Like go in there, like get the alpha DNA that can be the cure or something like that. I don't know.
Right.
And at this point, it would be fitting with how weird the franchise is. But yeah, I think like tonally, like if anybody was to sit down and be like, "Oh, I want to watch the first two before I watch the third one," it doesn't feel like you need to. Not only just narratively, but tonally. Like you're not going to get the same movie in the third one that you're going to get with the first or the second one at all. And I would say the only thing is knowing that Cillian Murphy is going to reappear. is the only element that I think is worth watching, specifically the first one. But
Yeah.
the second one really, at this point, serves really no narrative purpose, because if you remove the second one, you still assume that the rage virus is still at large at the end of the first one. So it still makes sense that 28 years later
Right.
that it's in the state that it's in. The second movie introduces the notion that the rage virus died out, that all like the zombies like starved to death. But they abandon that, right? Because it's like then you have the third movie where like now there's alpha, rage zombies roaming around, and all these other zombies that are just, there was a pregnant zombie. There's all these different like, yeah, which is a whole nother
Right.
question. But
Well,
like,
like the pregnant zombie, like that's why I thought they were going to reference 28 weeks later to be like it's a half and half, right? Like a half human, half zombie.
right.
But they don't do that. Yeah.
At least not yet, right? Like, I mean, we'll see what they do with the baby in the next movie. Spoiler for 28 years, but it's this weird thing of like the second movie establishes the notion that they can starve to death.
Yeah.
And if there's no more humans, just like, or at least not an abundance of humans roaming around. Like if the zombies that started it when there was a mass amount of people in London, if those zombies starved out and died 28 weeks later, then 28 years later they should all be dead. But so they
Right.
kind of abandon the franchise's own logic. And so that was a definitely a weird part. And in all, like watching the new one and revisiting the first two, while it was nice to do and there's elements I like about all of them, I don't know that I can say I'm like clamoring for this next one. How are you feeling? Or do you feel we need more?
No, I feel like unfortunately this is kind of fallen into a typical Hollywood market of the modern era, where they can't just focus on one movie, hope that it performs really well, and then go on to do a sequel if the idea and the cast are willing to return, and the director and the pay and all that kind of stuff. Like we've already got where Danny Boyle's announced, right? This is going to be a trilogy. So it kind of feels like this is right. You could get start of a story, the middle movie is going to be maybe bigger and better, and it's going to leave on like maybe an exciting ending. Till you have to get to the third movie, and you like have to invest in a new trilogy. But again, I think the problem is, as we've been talking, that there's no continuity really in those three movies right now. I feel like this new one should have maybe took the survivors of the first two, like maybe the kids elements. They could have maybe addressed, okay, well, this is where Jim is right now. This is maybe explains why he's not in the first movie. But maybe about how they've survived. Maybe they've formed like a survivors group of sorts of like these dramatic incidents happen in their lives. And had like some new introductions along the way, like Aaron Taylor Johnson's character, and then he had a son, and okay, like where was he in this whole situation? But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, I'm not really clamoring for a new one. I'll go see it. Of course, I love supporting movies. We both do, right? And Emma loves this, the first movie in particular. So I'll go see it because I'm intrigued. Okay, well, where they're going to fit Cillian Murphy in this big picture, and maybe we'll look back on this discussion and be like, yeah, we were wrong. This is the bee's knees, right? This is the shit, right? But right now I can't really see that happening. I'll be honest.
Yeah, no, it's I'm curious to see what they do. I think the next one has to stick the landing with the weird taste it left in your mouth at the end of the first one.
Yeah.
If they do it, then it'll be like, oh yeah, that ending of 28 years later is weird, but it's one of those things that can be recontextualized, right? You can get to the next movie and have that element of like, all right, they did it. They kind of like thread the needle. And until then, what we're left with is this movie that's like tonally all over the place, not connected to the other ones.
Yeah.
Has really great moments and great filmmaking. It's like definitely not a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination. But when I've seen people say like, "Oh yeah, I didn't like 28 Years Later," and I like the originals, I can be like, "Yeah, I get it." Like, I don't think you get in 28 Years Later what the first one or the second one gave you. If you're fans of the first two,
Yeah.
I don't think it necessarily 100% sets up that you're gonna like the third one. And so, there are some franchises, for instance, like if you like Back to the Future, maybe you're not going to like the third Back to the Future as much, but you're still going to like the third Back to the Future. Like, it's still a fun movie because it feels like Back to the Future. Then with like Star Wars, if you like A New Hope, you're going to like Return of the Jedi by the time you get there because it still feels like Star Wars. Maybe some franchises, not so much, right? Like, Rocky, by the time you get to like Rocky 5, maybe not so much of a beloved thing, but still like a franchise that ultimately, when you get to the later installments or you get like Creed, like it still feels tonally like the franchise. And I think with 28 years later, that all three movies are just tonally different. Filmmaking is different. Narrative is completely different. Tone is completely different. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do moving forward. But yeah, dude, I appreciate you taking the time to join me to sit here and ramble about these movies. I was going to make a normal traditional video, but anybody who watched live or watched after the fact, really appreciate you tuning in. And definitely leave some comments down below. I really want to hear from everybody. Like, how are you guys feeling about the franchise at this point? What's your favorite one of the three that we have? Do you feel like we need more? Do you want more? What are your grievances with the franchise? Maybe you absolutely adore this franchise. What do you totally disagree with us on here? All in all, though, any opinions are right. There's no wrong or right opinion. I think ultimately the 28 Days franchise is a good franchise. But I do think that there are things like continuity narratively or like, some tonal consistency that would definitely help to make this a franchise that is like really a strong recommendation for me. Whereas it's more of like a, hey, you might like this one, you might not like that one, or you might like this one. It's all dependent on your personal taste, which is okay to a degree, but I don't know, really quickly, I noticed my dad dropped a comment a while ago saying that funny around 2002, they were filming Fast and Furious 2 in Miami. Everything was practical, just like 28 Days. They were closing busy areas in Miami before work, which, yeah, it makes sense. I always love when movies have to kind of go, you hear those stories, right? One that I always love is the beginning of La La Land, and how there's that big dance number on that highway in LA, and they actually like shut that down like early in the morning, which, if you've ever been to California, shutting down a busy highway in the morning is not a good idea. Especially since it was like not only shutting it down, but they had to like get all those cars on there and then do this whole like one take big dance number where they're jumping on the cars and stuff like that. And I'm sure that was not easy to do. So I always appreciate movies that like have to do that. And also 28 Days, I believe, had moments where they didn't have like the permits to film in certain areas. So they would kind of like go when nobody was there. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention, I completely forgot, like probably the ugliest part of 28 Weeks Later. And I'm curious your thoughts. There's so many moments that are filmed, nighttime scenes that are filmed during the day where you can tell that they just like inverted the colors to like, and it has that ugly blue color. How did you feel about those nighttime sequences in the movie?
I think again, like looking like now with the lens of the technology that we have, you're like, yeah, you're not fooling me with that shot. But again, I think maybe at the time people were fooled and they thought, didn't think anything of it, right? Like film technology, film criticism's changed over the years and it continues to change. But yeah, man, it made for some ugly shots. Yeah, I was nah.
I've always struggled so hard with any like day for night sequences. And you don't see it as often these days. Thank God. Cameras have gotten better to film at night. More often than not, now what you have is those scenes where like if you have a little bit of glare coming from your window or something, it's so dark that you're just like, dude, I can't see anything in these sequences. But a few years ago, I did a rewatch of Merlin, the BBC show, which is one of my favorite BBC shows ever made. Super cheesy, very much in the vein of like early Doctor Who, but in Merlin and Arthur Pendragon kind of setting. Right. And in the last season of that show in particular, they changed production teams, I think, or something, and they changed how they were approaching it. So many day for night sequences where the shots are so bright, but they're like this ugly blue to make it seem like it's nighttime, but you could tell that there's sunlight on them, Right. And it just looks so terrible, dude. It just looks so bad. I just don't get why anybody has ever done it and thought this looks good.
It's all like production costs, I guess, and the editing on, I guess, the what they've got in the arsenal right at the time.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, and like you just can't get away with that kind of stuff, and especially in like horror movies, especially, you know.
It's just too obvious. It just looks so gross, and that's definitely a thing of the 2000s a little bit more. The 2000s and the early 2010s definitely had a lot of those day for night shots, and there's been a couple here and there that do okay with it, but usually not so much. But anyway, man, to bring this to a close, thank you so much for taking the time, everybody who watched live or after the fact. As usual, Mike, I'd love to just give you a quick moment to plug anything you got on your channel, anything you got coming out, anything you want to have people check out.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you, brother, for having me on this stream. Really enjoyed having a chat about it and a bit more in depth. Yeah, for people who don't know, yeah, my name's Mike. Channel name is Did You See That? Yeah, I dropped a video the other day of 10 facts of Back to the Future. Maybe you might know them, maybe you might not. So I dropped that video the other day. Definitely got a lot more Back to the Future content coming up very shortly. But as for me, movie wise, I've got a bit of a busy week ahead of movies. So tomorrow I'm seeing Weapons. Director of Barbarian. Anyone knows me, Barbarian's my favorite horror movie of the last 10 years, so I'm excited. Freakier Friday on Sunday, so I expect reviews for those two. Monday, I'm seeing an early screener of The Life of Chuck, which I'm really excited for. Actually, it looks like it's one of those kind of heartwarming inspiration movies I really need right now, just in general, you know. So yeah, I look forward to that. And then next week on my birthday, I'm going to go see The Naked Gun. So yeah, expect 4 reviews at least anyway in the next week.
Nice, man. Nice. I'm looking forward to all those. Yeah, I'm going to see Weapons tonight. Like he said, directed by Zach Kreger, who did Barbarian a few years ago.
Which we saw together, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to say the first movie that Mike and I got to see together when he came here to Florida. We saw it at a theater together in Dolby, which was really nice too. Definitely a cool experience. Be able to see it together in general, but you know, just the movie in general is a good one. And I know Mike has revisited it several times since and really loves it. Definitely a standout horror film of the last like 5 years for sure for me. Don't love it as much as Mike, but it's a good movie. It's very much a good movie. Don't get me wrong. So yeah, I'll have a review for that later tonight. I just dropped a review for the very terrible War of the Worlds that everybody's been talking about with Ice Cube. That's on Amazon Prime. I only watched it because of how bad people were saying it is. So that review is currently live on the channel. If you guys want to check that out, I have a short review and a full-length review for it. I will also be covering it as well on the Latino Slant, which is a website that I've been writing reviews for, and I've been on their YouTube channel lately, doing some live streams and a couple of videos for them. So expect that as well. Outside of that, I probably won't have anything dropping this weekend. Maybe take a few days off of videos to not oversaturate the channel. But on Tuesday, I am seeing Nobody 2. I'm pretty excited about that.
Nice.
And on Wednesday, I'll be seeing the new Spike Lee film, Highest to Lowest with Denzel. Pretty excited about that. And then, yeah, you know, hopefully I have another episode to convince the panel next week. And, you know, we'll get back to your regularly scheduled programming. But yeah, anyway, Mike, thank you so much for joining. Guys, go check out Mike's channel. Did You See That? Tons of great content over there coming and already present there. And I mentioned War of the Worlds, but Mike was the first one I personally know who already covered it. So if you want to go see him rant on the movie, go check that out. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.